today we're talking about publishers. I mean, I've had some really interesting conversations with publishers over the last 12, 24 months when, all of this sort of programmatic stuff sort of rose up. And really it was just sort of a narrative. Really what publishers were trying to do is make sense of their data and actually build really, really interesting businesses around that and make them more sustainable. And today's publisher panel today is just kind of discussing that, right? Talking about how the organizations have built the sort of in-house resource and built their sort of strategies around technology as well. So we've got three fantastic speakers here today. So I'll let them introduce themselves briefly and then we'll just jump straight into the discussion.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Finnegan. I work at Live Nation. I'm the Vice President of Programmatic and Product Innovation.
Hey, I'm Sara. I work at Turner, and I help out on product strategy across both the ad and the consumer side, as well as our foundational data strategies.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Felix Zeng. I work at the Weather Company, and I'm in charge of programmatic demand.
Thank you, guys. So let's talk about, first, Mike, let's talk about your sort of overview strategy, how you've built your sort of internal capabilities around the data piece, execution management. So it gives you sort of an oversight, your journey, effectively.
Yeah, and I think journey is a very, very good way to describe it. So for those who don't know, Live Nation owns Ticketmaster. We ticket 96% of all events in North America. We also have a strong global footprint as well. And so our data is a little bit more one-to-one than some other content publishers. So we're very aware that we ticket live events. Therefore, there's typically an artist, a genre or category of entertainment that it falls within. And so a lot of what we've had to figure out on our end wasn't what is the data that we have. It was more about from a sponsorships angle and how we appeal to brands more so than selling tickets. How do we augment and package our data so that it's really about reaching personas and personalities more than it is just trying to find the live event seeker in a specific category. So it was a lot of consultation. It's a lot of understanding what our marketers want. How do we find millennials within our information? How do we find high value, high discretionary income spenders within our information as well? The journey from a technology standpoint, there are some basics that a publisher has to have in order to take advantage of the data. And it's also about understanding what type of data you have and kind of where it exists. So a lot of it is before even figuring out what you need, it's a lot of taking stock. Find all the nooks and crannies where your data sits, especially I came into the company about 2 years ago, so I had a lot of fact finding to do, knowing full well that the vision is having a good stood up program with products in market that digital buyers, programmatic buyers would find to be of interest. And so then after you're able to take stock of your information, what sits within our CRM, what sits digitally, how can we centralize all of this information and then start to really kind of develop products on top of it.
So you came in, had a look around. Do you think that sometimes publishers make the mistake of just jumping straight in and making the classic mistake of buying technology and not actually, like as you said, taking stock of, well, here's our CRM data, here's our site data, how do we all work that? Was there a process involved and how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do just say, like, I need a DMP, let's go get it, right? And, that is a very, very necessary component. I think we've made mistakes along the way where we've certainly learned and been able to adjust course and improve over time. One of our mistakes was just tag everything, collect everything, organize later. And I think we're learning from that now is, don't laugh.
It's a common mistake.
It is a common mistake.
And you're right. You learned. You're better for it.
Exactly.
But it's what many do.
Yeah.
Let's hoard all the data and deal with it later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, you're a veteran of the ad tech space. I mean, come on, you know where all the bodies are buried, Mick, effectively, right? We've had some great conversations over years about ad tech, and when I heard you went to like a publisher, I was going, wow, that's pretty strange. But actually, when we talked about it in Mexico, it actually made a lot of sense because obviously, the company you work for is just huge and enormous. So let's talk about you. Your journey is quite interesting. How did you end up in the publisher side?
Second publisher.
I beg your pardon, second publisher.
Felix had the misfortune of working with me at Weather. And what's really interesting about Turner, when you think about Turner from a data standpoint, is you don't think about Turner and data by default. Because unlike Weather, we don't have really distinct proprietary data in the weather data and location data, or unlike Live Nation, the transaction data. But instead, what we have is, and Syrian said it, like diversified content at scale. And when you think about Turner's properties, you think about news with CNN, gaming across the game portfolio with Adult Swim and Cartoon Network, also all your entertainment within those two, plus kids, plus TNT, TBS, and then of course Turner Sports with NBA League Pass, NCAA Championship, and some PGA in there. What you end up having is an incredible amount of consumer touch points across all of this diversified content and different platforms. When you think across linear, think across connected/OTT, and then mobile. And then what you're really able to do is very much to what Mike exactly spoke to, really take a step back, survey, and then say, all right, what's the best way to aggregate up all of these data points from all these different consumer interactions? So you're really starting to able to map the consumer experience across all these different touch points, different types of content, different content modalities. So you get into, text, video, short form, long form, and then say, all right, what can we really be able to pull out in terms of unique audience insights about how consumers are engaging with different types of content, different times of day, and different modalities, what that translates back to in terms of their mindsets, and then how can we use that from a full feedback loop, not only to enrich with our marketers and the advertisers running with us, but just as importantly, back to our brands, so we can start informing our own product development as Turner moves more and more to direct-to-consumer. Probably read Turner Classic Movies, if anyone's into the classics. Filmstruck rolled out, which is a direct-to-consumer OTT app, and saying, all right, now we not only know, and we already know how people are engaging with old movies and this different type of content across other platforms, we can use that to inform this rollout and then start building that core DR marketing functionality just off our own data and really better using the data we have across the entire business, including informing content development, which we do across short form and long form. So a huge part of it was less about, okay, like we're really fortunate in that we have one or two key proprietary data assets like these guys, and more about what can we do and how can we best leverage our scale and our diversified content to really derive net new consumer insights from that, and then really build out a framework that enables us to have a feedback loop into all different parts of the business, from content creation to content distro to, just importantly, marketing and ad sales.
But it is interesting though. I mean, because I often sit in these panels and it seems to be the data piece is always about targeting and advertising. But really, it's interesting you raise that kind of Netflix with Stranger Things. Effectively, that series was created around the data that Netflix gleaned from its client base. So it's kind of like they created that show around the touch points they understood from their cute cast. Interesting 80s references and brilliant soundtrack. So, I mean, it's interesting you talk about that, and that helps to inform what you should create for your audience.
Yep, and that's exactly where we're building and getting towards now. Because and I've been at Turner for about 7 months, so long before I got there, huge initiative underway to do exactly what Mike had to go through at Live Nation, which was just audit the landscape of our own properties and determine what's the best way to aggregate all of that data, what infrastructure, to what you exactly talked about, versus build versus buy versus license, do we need to be building in-house so that we could truly have a centralized data instance? What then, just as importantly, not only do what we build and what we license, but what skill sets do we need and what net new teams and functions do we need to build out across the org to best manage this?
Felix, I didn't mention you were a publisher because I always think you're a bit of a data company.
That's why it's technology company.
Yeah,
exactly.
I listened to one of your colleagues there recently on the DigiDay podcast, which was very good in explaining the proposition that you were.
Neil.
But you take a different approach to this, obviously. You've always been sort of embedded in the data, because I'm interested in where you sit at the minute.
Yeah, so I think ultimately our job is to drive advertiser results. And whether we identify very early, thanks to visionaries like Sara, that indeed, that we basically have a certain data set that drives results for advertisers. For instance, CPG is one of our biggest verticals, right? When specific weather conditions really drive sales of ice cream. We all know heat does, but also heat is different, right? What's 90 degrees in New York is hot, but in Miami is actually not really hot. So it would have different results on ice cream sales. And we were able to identify exactly what's the correct temperature to drive those product sales in stores. And
Condition mix. Come on.
exactly. Well, I'm not stealing the show, Sarah. So we were able to identify those specific conditions and tie multiple conditions together, whether it's heat, humidity, pollen count, and combine it to make the most impact on advertiser sales. And we were able to package that into an advertising product.
So I mean, interesting though that we're talking about resource and technology and strategy. I wonder how you came to the conclusions you did around your own sort of technology. Because how do you sort of implement EMP? How do you piece all these pieces together? What are the bits missing? Like where is the technology going to come from that helps you sort of drive that initiative? So let's talk about actually how you sort of inform how you can take technology in and the people you actually hire.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we were fortunate within Live Nation to have Ticketmaster as already a data powerhouse that was pretty stood up. And Ticketmaster kind of functions as its own organization. And luckily, even though Live Nation is the parent company of Ticketmaster, we were able to tap into a lot of those resources. And if anything else, help Ticketmaster kind of expand their portfolio of data. So we brought our needs to the existing data science team. And the team that managed our customer database to begin with. We explored our data management platform together. We assessed all of our collective needs. We have, I'll boil it down. We have 3 orgs. We have many more than that within Live Nation that leverage the same core data asset. We have a Live Nation promotions business to promote, tours like the Guns N' Roses tour over the summer. They're using data to find. And Guns N' Roses hasn't toured for 15 years. So how do you find those fans and how do you build those corollaries?
They have a large tax bill they have to pay. That's
exactly. Yeah. So so that one team is using data, the same core assets we are, but differently. The Ticketmaster team is using data to effectively sell tickets for their clients and their merchants, and we're using data to help align sponsors to the right target audience. So that infrastructure was already in place for the most part, and then it was our opportunity to bring our use cases and build on top of it. Some of the areas where we've had to innovate is actually it's very similar to some of the things that Sarah has to work with from Turner is what are all of our consumer touch points? And a lot of our consumer touch points are in the physical world. So we own 84 venues across North America. We put on 38 festivals every year. And so how do we get a better understanding of fans who are on site? And so that was a layer of infrastructure that we had to bring in from everything from RFID technology partners to beacon technology partners, even ticketing, access points, and all that. And then, we're assessing what is the kind of data that we can collect from this and how can we fold that into our existing ecosystem. So you can almost look at it like if our requests almost demanded, bolt-on is the wrong word for it, but if we have an infrastructure and a bedrock that's already there, how do we start to apply different layers of data and recognition on top of that?
So just give me a typical sort of overview of what that looks like. So where are you pulling?
We're going to be here a while.
I mean, do you have like one central point?
Weeds.
I know, I'm curious. I mean, do you have a central point in terms of like, here's my DMP and I bring all my segments in that, build that, and then execute it? How do you plug all those things in together? Because obviously the thing about DMPs was. Sure. They don't integrate very well with other things. So it's kind of like you have a CRM that doesn't work with them and you have a site.
Our data is still not integrated with our DMP. And
sorry, what was that?
Our data is not integrated with our DMP. And it works exactly
So it just sits in the corner gathering dust.
No, they built.
We built our own thing.
Okay.
We built our own technology.
Weather.
Yeah.
Well, so okay, just what does that look like then? I'm curious. Did you look at your own sort of specific requirements and said, there's nothing out here in the market, I need to build something ourselves?
Yeah, exactly. So the thing about weather data and location data is that it's not cookie based, right? So it's probably might be raining outside right now, but in the next 5 hours, it's not raining. So as a user, I could be classified under rain for the next 5 hours, but after that, I shouldn't be. And so when we saw that, there wasn't a DMP that basically, we talked to a lot of DMPs and they looked at us like it was the strangest thing they ever heard in their lives. And so at that point, we've just decided, like, instead of just trying to convince these guys to build what we want, we were just going to build it ourselves.
Right. And how long, what was the process? How did that look like? Did you hire a tech team or internal guys? It must have been like, building tech is not easy.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. You know?
No, we luckily, Weather has always been a technology company. We've been a science company for a long time, so we had resources that we could leverage to start building it. And it wasn't like we went full blast at the beginning. We actually built it piece by piece, and then we basically tried certain pieces to see how it works with advertiser data, matching up their sales data out there, prove that it generates revenues, which then creates a virtuous cycle of more resources, develop better products from there.
see Sarah laughing here. She's probably saying, "Oh, I can't believe that process. I was involved in that."
It's awesome to sit and hear Felix talk about it because
Well, she did all the work, so.
Because it's incredible how the product has evolved from exactly what Felix described, and it was 4 years ago a team of 4 people building it out to now taking that WeatherFX product and what they're doing, integrating it into Watson, which is incredible. And you think about that's truly like the evolution and something you can do because you opt to have such a unique data set that rather than pushing a vendor, build in-house. And then that flexibility it affords you over the long term is exactly what Felix described and what Weather/IBM is able to benefit from now.
So you're basically you built your own technology to build the segments because most of the data you have is not cookie based. And then you're feeding that into Watson, which is the machine learning piece, to help decision buys. Is that correct? Am I?
We're working on that right now. That is the step that we're taking. We just roll out our first Watson ads. It's not weather-specific trigger right now, but there's a weather element to it. So, for instance, if it's cold and one of our advertisers is Campbell's, we might inform, hey, we should do a chicken soup recipe. Don't do meat roast or something like that. So it's playing a part in that, but we're still building it out as we speak.
Sarah, let's talk about the technology that underpins your business in a minute. I guess it's a different approach. I mean, you're very much a traditional media business vis-a-vis these two gentlemen here. Like you're talking about pure play content. So I mean, your approach is going to be a lot different than the two
Yes,
gentlemen.
I mean, Felix hit it with Weather. Weather very early on was always a technology and data science company because of the weather, and then of course, 4 years ago, when the whole company pivoted, David and Kurt went over it, was yes, we're going to make data a core competency, and we have unique data sets, so we need to build for it. For Turner, it was a very similar question, but a very different type of data set. It was, all right, we know that data is becoming increasingly more important across the ecosystem, not only for our advertisers, but as it informs how consumer consumption habits are changing across platforms. We know data matters. Now the question is, yes or no, do we want to make this a core competency? And that's something I think every company needs to ask itself, and then that dictates how are you going to support it? Are you going to do maybe it's not only licensed vendors, but completely outsourced teams? Or is it going to be a mix of build plus buy plus license, and how big are the teams that you're going to stand up? What Turner very much dove all in on was, yes, while we are very much and have been a traditional content company, that's not the future. The future will always be quality content, but you need that underlying data layer. So yes, we need data to be a core competency.
Do you think that the stuff that you're trying to build internally, is that in the ecosystem? Does the technology is it there for you to use, or will you have to take a proprietary or custom approach to this?
It's actually incredibly interesting because we've, up until this second, have all talked about digital. And with Turner, our business is very much still driven on the linear side. And what Turner's built out over the last 20 years is their own proprietary linear tech stack to enable everything that goes into running content, scheduling pods, running commercials on linear. So when you think about data not only informing digital, but also informing linear as you move to both audience-based planning and then the future of, quote, programmatic linear TV, if it ever shows up, it introduces a whole new layer of complexity because what we've built internally is not only legacy, but works incredibly well. So you have another layer of how whatever you're building net new for digital and whatever technology you're licensing that is very familiar with operating in digital environments, how do we go about and start scoping out how that gets integrated into our linear stack? So to go to the TV examples, when we're talking and doing about POCs around programmatic linear TV, it's very different conversations than something as simple as, hey, can we go to a buying platform and tap into incremental programmatic demand the way we will do for digital? Because on linear, it's around, all right, a POC means there's not actually going to be any integration points. So let's see what we could do to scope out something that's obviously a little more manual. And then down the road, it becomes, all right, there's going to be a very real shift in hurdle where we have to build in net new to our proprietary linear stacks.
But obviously, building technology is a cost, and it's
Yes.
also like you've got to keep the product up and going as well. So, do you push back to a lot of your vendors that I need X, Y, and Z built, and you can have my business?
We're very unique on the linear side because Turner does not have a surplus of ads. Like Turner, from a linear standpoint, sells out, is very well upfront, is incredibly well in scatter, all linear phrases, which I've learned to love over the last 7 months. And so it really becomes about, if we're going to look at net new, essentially demand sources for linear, it actually starts morphing so it's not dissimilar to if you're in a premium situation with digital, which is, all right, what are we talking about in terms of demand guarantees? And once we can not only prove out that that demand is there and prove out that we can successfully execute a proof of concept, then and only then will we actually start talking about tech build and tech integration. And unfortunately, while with digital, yes, like it's very easy, and many do push a lot of that integration work onto the vendor. With linear, and this is unique to us and other giant linear companies who have their own proprietary stacks, you really don't have that luxury. And there's only so much the vendor can do on their end, versus you have so many interdependent systems internally that the internal work just has to get done.
Is that your thinking as well, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, we're much more of the partner than build, especially when it comes to taking action on our data. And a lot of our build resources are really dedicated to the ticketing platform and really fortifying that infrastructure. But from the partnership side, and especially from using data to drive marketing programs, whether sponsored or internal, when we were vetting DMPs in 2014, and that DMP market was still. It still is growing and maturing every single day. One of our core requirements was that, bands don't tour every day, every year, that time might pass and we need some of that transaction data to be persistent. And so, when we selected our data management platform partner, one of our core requirements was that they build transaction segments that don't have an expiration on it. So, 2 years later, we can find that user again. And because we have an ID that ties back across, cross device as well as tied to email, that we're able to surface that user information and make them aware of that show and that favorite band of theirs from, that they bought a ticket 2 years ago. So those are requirements that we did put when vetting a platform partner.
Felix, you want to jump there? Sorry.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that you have 3 very different publishers here. I think we have to understand, like, if you were a publisher and sitting in our seat, what is the outcome you want to drive, and then build the technology on that. For instance, ticket sales is something very important to Mike. We actually don't do any ticket sales, and so for us, it's really advertiser focused. And as a result, we are actually making very key decisions about when do we partner. If the partner's not working out, where do we build? And one example is a lot of advertisers love advertising on weather, but they also want to take that data and advertise it off property. And so we were able to work with a lot of DSPs and basically work together and build a product that allows the advertiser to basically do off property buys as well.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it all comes back to knowing what your end use cases are, knowing what your end goals are, and knowing very clearly what your use cases are, to what Mike hit on, so that when you are partnering, you're extremely clear that these are our use cases and these are our business requirements. And it makes it much, much easier going through that RFI and that vetting process, because it's very clear what you're solving for. You can get much, and I think it's something that honestly, especially you talk about DMPs, appreciate, because they know what you're going to be asking for once you close, once you have to actually go integrate and implement. And it gets you a really clear handle on which ones might work from a pricing standpoint, but might not work from an actual capabilities. So
it's interesting that everybody's talking about data being a sort of a monetization piece for publishers. I'm just wondering, are we getting to that point now where it actually is? I mean, look at some interesting acquisitions by, Unilever bought a Dollar Shave Club, and that was like $1 billion. But that transaction was more about data, because marketers want. But Under Armour obviously buying Map My Ride and MyFitnessPal. Suddenly they've got 30 million users. And does that mean that publishers are in a really interesting spot in terms of data? I mean, you guys are sitting on incredible data in terms of different business, granted, but incredible data. So is that going to be a big core driver for you? And what does that look like? How does that monetization opportunity sort of manifest itself?
Yeah, we are. I think we've kind of doubled down on data being kind of the future of what our business is to the market, and that comes in many different forms, and that's not always outright just selling data, right? So that comes in enhancing our current media products with better intelligence, making our partners smarter, and I think that's one area where we've really driven the business this year specifically by leveraging our customer database and our partners who are fortunate to have a CRM file on their side to really tell them about their exact customers and help them segment on their end so that they're aligning their message to the audience who's most prone to receiving it. And so we think that's really important. When we get into data monetization, and that's actually taking our either cookies or mobile IDs and putting a value against them to the market, that's something that I think this is going to mature. So I've got a lot of very strong feelings about this. From the publisher side of it, I think that it will be hopefully a breath of fresh air to the market to have quality branded data that comes from a source that is probably even a consumer source to you guys, like the Weather Channel, Turner, Live Nation. So as a media buyer, when that data would be able to hit the market, there is a validity to that some of these data aggregators or data networks can't bring. And it brings transparency, and it also brings a kind of a face to the data. So the ability to talk to us and say, hey, I need some customization here, or can you tell me about how this segment was brought about? And so I'm very bullish on the second-party data market. I think what publishers like us need to figure out is what are those initial swim lanes? Because it's about you don't get a first chance to do this, right? So bring your data to the market and finding partners that have good alignment to the data, if not endemic alignment, so that you can get a good understanding and get that feedback loop. So we've kept this asset internal, behind our doors, where we are the ones who are giving feedback, about how this media campaign was running and is this audience providing lift. But then as soon as you lose control of the coupling of the media side of it, that feedback loop becomes so much more important. And the ability to be able to pilot a lot of these data opportunities and really work closely with partners who understand the value that you're bringing to them and saying that in exchange for this, I also need your feedback on, did this give you lift? How much lift did it give? Did it give any lift at all? How can we optimize these segments so they can be more value to you? Before figuring out the wrong phrase, but before kind of approaching the market from a broader capacity.
Sarah.
I was going to say, it's interesting because Mike ended up talking about sort of notion of audience segments and be it first-party audience segments and exposing those. And where I actually think the bigger opportunity is with the foundational data set. So what you started talking about and what we've chatted a lot about, which is the whole notion of publishers, exactly what he mentioned, like be it a hashed user ID, be it a mobile ID, be it just registration data and different attributes, be it for around purchases or content consumption against that. And being able to monetize that in terms of, you could almost call it direct sales, you could call it private data marketplaces, and doing it in a non-competing, non-channel conflict way with your core media sales. And what that really results in thinking about applications for that data outside of just audience segments. So outside of just getting a first-party audience segment for you to run.
So how does that look like though? How do you even price that? I mean, and there's always the issue of you decouple media from data, then potentially you commoditizing your media effectively.
Yep. And I think the biggest thing is not thinking about the data in terms of just an audience segment that you then want to slap on media and target. Mm-hmm. Instead, thinking about from the same point of, here's the foundational data the first party data that we're able to collect. What are other key attributes that we're not able to collect, but we know we need to maybe build our own audience segments, or more importantly, just do better analysis around consumer insights to inform content creation? And then where can we go out into the market and purchase those missing attributes so we can better enhance and enrich our foundational first-party data and ultimately increase, be it match rates and fill rates against that? So I think where that starts to look and how you price that is still very, very early. You think about startups like a Narrative or an Arbor that are starting to think about what can we do from a data marketplace standpoint? And then it really does become a true data marketplace rather than hey, let's dump a bunch of third-party, non-transparent, overpriced audience segments into your DMP or DSP and go buy them.
Can I jump on that real quick?
Yeah, that's a Turner.
Yeah.
It's a Turner segment. I'd pay £10 for it.
So we've gone down the CRM path of and not talking about segments. We're talking about in data enrichment and things like that. It's I think the promise is there. What we have right now is a market that's really riddled in legal hurdles to get to that point of being able to take advantage of partner-to-partner data matching or insights or anything of that nature. And I think when we're talking about bringing quick liquidity to a market, right now there's a big marketplace for segmentation purchasing, right? So there's a lot of cookie and mobile ID purchasing through DSPs, through DMPs, and if you want to internally with your own company say that I can make a business out of this data that we have, like the Hail Mary is getting a partner to do a significant CRM match or leveraging some of the arbors or narratives to help you do that. But to kind of hit a couple singles, and get the volume going and prove a business internally.
Love the baseball narrative. That's
right.
good.
It's very, very topical.
It's an ad network play. We're just gonna.
But it's not. But it's transparent because it comes from the first party. Right. So it's not an ad network. I'm not obfuscating this with anybody else's data. It's our data.
Yeah, we're not arbitraging you.
Exactly.
Yes, it is. So call it a private marketplace. It's a short-term fix.
But that's not a network play. A private marketplace, if I want to sell somebody media, they still know it's coming from Live Nation or Turner or Weather. So it's direct, me to you. So there is transparency in that. Where's the network side of that?
I won't use network. I'll say private marketplace.
Deal. It is a private marketplace.
So
of data.
it's a baby step to what you want to get to.
Yes.
Which is better fluidity.
Right. And then you can go and say, look, our data has value. It is being adopted rapidly. So how do we innovate in this area while find significant? It's almost like how people look from, how do you graduate buyers by putting supply out there and assessing demand. Right? And so you can see where, hey, look, we've got a huge buyer, brand X is buying our data left and right. Let's go reach out to them and see if we can do something more significant that grows that relationship.
Or open to private.
Yeah.
But Felix, I mean, you obviously have a very, you're a very ad-driven business. Do you see that that's not really a big opportunity because that's your USP, that's our data, that's what we do?
I disagree. Back to your original the premise of the question, which was, is there a business case? And I think we proved it out 4 years ago. There's definitely a business case. We have generated significant amounts of revenues on it. Team has grown dramatically. And we're basically expanding out to now beyond weather data to location data, to seeing where the users are and where they go and creating profiles based on that. I think there is definitely a case where when we combine data, for instance, when we combine data with a retailer's data, it's a much more powerful data set. We can really see how our data really drives end results. And like Mike was saying, right now there's a lot of hurdles in the marketplace. I would love to work with you guys to figure out, like, how does that cookie data match with my...
That's our next question.
Yeah, but I'm saying there is value in that, but there is still a lot of different players doing a lot of different things, and sometimes the third-party overpriced stuff gets in the way, and so we need to get transparency into like what's really valuable data. And I agree, it's really first-party data.
In your business, though, is it a case of you're buying media with your own data, or is it a case of like you're actually just giving those segments to third-party buyers?
So right now, the business is media with data.
So you've touched on the sort of co-op thing, which I'm very much interested in. Obviously, Facebook did $7 billion in 1 quarter, which is absolutely insanity. Two companies have basically ruled the roost in our industry, which is getting sickening at this stage. So how do you guys, who obviously have very significant media businesses, work together to scale this data opportunity? Because obviously there's 3 publishers on this stage who are not very competitive because they've had very different businesses. So how do you see a relationship working with you guys, and how does that look like, and what potential can we see around this? Well, we can start it today, have coffee and figure it out.
I mean, I think it's all to kind of what we were talking about around how we think about vendors. It's not dissimilar. It's start out with what's a good use case. So if it's an ad-driven business, say, all right, what's a good and applicable advertiser who not only we know is weather impacted, but also happens to have some adjacency with live events or music, and then being able to do a corresponding analysis and go back to them and say, look, these are already 2 big partners of yours. You're already working heavily with weather, and you're working heavily with Live Nation on this in-event sponsorship. This is our proposal to you around how we combine data sets. We'd be able to show you how different weather condition mixes, to what Felix spoke about, actually drove different brand engagement, brand sentiment, and maybe it's brand purchases or consumption at these different venues. So maybe you'd actually then partner and continue partnering with Live Nation and tweak how you're actually activating those in-venue sponsorships. I don't know why I started with weather, but the whole notion being starting with a really clear use case. In the case of Turner, it might be Turner works with a lot of leagues. Live Nation sells tickets for a lot of leagues, starting with a clearly defined use case and then going to that partner, showing where there would be value. Because I think the biggest thing is you need to prove it from business case. And the business case needs to tie to either net new revenue, incremental revenue, or incremental value to the user experience that you could really translate back to revenue.
I mean, is this an opportunity?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The co-op thing.
Absolutely. So I think every publisher, actually even every marketer who's in this audience right now, has one specific view of their world and of their customer base. And so, for example, we know from the Live Nation perspective, we know absolutely everything about a person's live entertainment habits, right? And live is different from just content consumption. So we're super deep in that vertical, but we don't know things like what kind of car people drive, what kind of food they like to eat, what kind of television they like to consume. And so those are things where we need to make our profiles more robust. And I think we'd rather build partnerships that have a lot of correlative value so that we can, help out people like Turner and Weather while they're helping us out. And again, like I go back to the value of having recognizable brands that fortify your business. So if we go in and if we make some kind of hybrid product around comedy fans and all of Turner's comedy, or basketball and golf, which we have really strong correlations there, and if we were to approach the market and grow both of our access to a certain marketer or to a certain audience who wants to market around those events, there's a really strong brand caliber that goes into that. A lot of this gets into how do you sketch up what the opportunity is from a partnership perspective before you even bring it to market, and that's going to look different relative to what the media footprint looks like, what the data footprint looks like, what you can create, how does the 1 + 1 = 3 thing manifest when those conversations happen.
Is there a cross-device play here as well? I mean, obviously that's the big thing with Facebook. You buy once, you can buy everywhere type of thing. So
Absolutely.
Is that an opportunity, you think, to kind of get because you guys are significantly sized businesses. You've got some interesting data points.
Right.
I think cross-device, but just as importantly, to Mike mentioned, also offline.
Right.
And being able to tangibly bridge digital to offline, be it there with events or here with location data. And when you start thinking about then, cross-device, totally desktop and mobile, sure, everyone will say we figured it out, not really. And then all of a sudden you're going to introduce connected, which is now becoming increasingly important. And just as rapidly as it's growing in importance, it's growing in fragmentation. Yeah. And while connected will take a much longer time to reach sort of a point of significance, what's already at a point of significance is physical location, because we're all physically sitting somewhere all the time. So then I see the bigger value, less cross-device, and more just digital period to offline and physical.
And Felix, do you see that opportunity as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the advantage the two giants have is that they're one company and they have many different touch points, so they're able to aggregate data. If we were able to build some kind of transparency among publishers, certainly having that data is great. And so what Sara said, talking about offline, Weather has about 180 million downloads of our app. In order to get Weather, you always have to share your location. So yes, we do know you're sitting in this chair right now, Sarah.
I've never heard
Stage.
from probably in the past year to year and a half, I've never heard more brand marketers talk about owning moments, right? And those moments are not passive ad experiences. Those moments are active, disruptive in a good way, impactful, immersive. And that really exists in the physical world. Some people can do it digitally and do it well when there's really nice synergy between ad and content, and also awareness of what kind of relevance that ad's being driven in. But the ability to leverage location data and know that a group of individuals who are highly propense to engage with your brand are going to be at a certain place at a certain time. We can give you the opportunity to communicate with them either physically or digitally. And I think that's where a lot of this cross-device, but the data has to lead to understanding what that opportunity is. So if you start with data from an insights perspective and leave activation secondary, the first thing is who and where. And then the later part is how do you want to engage.
All right, on that note, Mike, we'll finish up because we're actually running out of time. But thank you very much for your time, all of you. Enlightening conversation and really great insights into your businesses. And thanks for coming. And round of applause, please, for our...
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.